Have you ever had that moment where you are, let's say you're washing the dishes, and then you realize you need to go grab a towel. So you go grab the towel, and then you realize that the laundry just finished. So you're like, all right, I'm going to fold this laundry really quick. And in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, but the dishes. You're just going to finish folding the laundry, whatever. And then your kid needs attention. So then, oh my gosh, but what about the dishes? And then all of a sudden, late at night, you're laying in bed. Oh my gosh, I didn't finish the dishes. So what this annoying little thing right here is, where it's like the dishes, that's called the Zeigarnik Effect. And what the Zeigarnik Effect is it's basically a fancy way of saying that your brain does not like an open loop. So it's going to sit there and nag at you until you close the loop. And this was discovered by a woman named Bluma Zeigarnik. And she was sitting in a cafe in Vienna, and she noticed that the servers could remember these really complex orders. And they could remember them from the very start, like when the customer ordered, right until they closed their tab out. But once that tab was closed, they couldn't remember much. And so she started looking into this, and she discovered that it's universal, that our brains will hold on to unfinished tasks a lot better than it will ones that are completed. And your brain does this because our brains only have so much energy. Like, they use a lot of energy. And unfinished tasks create cognitive tension. So it's like cognitive load that you're constantly carrying around, and your brain just wants to let it go because it's got a lot going on up there. And so your brain will keep these loops, these unfinished loops, in the working memory because it doesn't want those loose ends. It wants everything finished so that part can relax. And what's kind of funny is that when I spoke about event boundary theory, where you walk into a room and you forget why you're in there. That's event boundary theory. And the reason that you forget is partially because your brain organizes reality in certain ways. And those boundaries are one of the ways that your brain organizes reality. One of the other things, though, is that your brain will forget because you walking into that room, crossing that boundary, interrupted the loop. So it's this really frustrating pattern, right? And another thing that people will probably absolutely understand is when you're watching a TV show, you reach the last episode of the season and they leave you on a cliffhanger. And the reason that the cliffhanger works so well, if it's a good cliffhanger, I guess. I'm sure there are terrible ones, but we'll pretend it's a really good one. Great show, good cliffhanger. The reason they work so well is because of the Zeigarnik Effect, because that cliffhanger is leaving that open loop. You need to know what happens. Your brain wants to know because it needs to complete that pattern. And so there's a way to use the Zeigarnik Effect to your advantage. And it's called micro starts, where, like, instead of trying to accomplish the whole task, like let's say you need to clean the kitchen, right? Instead of being like, well, I'm going to clean this whole kitchen, I'm going to wash one dish, just one. And this isn't going to necessarily solve everything. You know, it's not the cure for super depression, but sometimes all you need is that little tiny start, and then your brain will be like, well, I can't leave this now. I've got to do this. You know, or I've noticed that with me. I will be like, I'm going to start one dish. I'm going to wash this one dish. And then I'm like, well, I'm here. I might as well wash another. Well, I might as well wash another. And then finally it gets closed that way. But it's also okay if your loop that you're closing is just washing the one dish. Sometimes you need to give yourself that grace. So let's talk really quick about when the Zeigarnik Effect backfires and how to solve that. So when it backfires is when you end up with the overthinking loops, the ruminating, the to-do lists that just keep going, and suddenly it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, you're wide awake because you're getting overwhelmed by all the things you have to do, right? So one of the things that tends to be really helpful with that too is to have a notebook and like a pencil, pad, whatever you're going to write with, next to the bed. When those things pop into your head, write them down. Because like it tells your brain that it doesn't need to hold on to that anymore. Okay, you know that it's there, it's written down, you will remember it in the morning. Your brain loves closure, and it's going to harass you until it gets that closure. So when you do the writing it down, so that way it's out of your mental baggage, or doing the micro starts to get that momentum going, because sometimes getting going is the hardest part. Little things like that can actually really, really help you in the long run.